How to replace the cylinder head gasket on a 4-cylinder engine. Good morning. Today I show you how to change a cylinder head gasket with a 4-cylinder engine. First we let the engine cool down completely. Now we need to disconnect the battery. What tools we need I show you now. We need a standard bit set with ratchet, a torque wrench, a rubber hammer, a rotary angle gauge, and sandpaper. We disassembled the engine cover. Now we remove the air filter box.
Der ist befestigt mit 3 mal Kreuzschrauben. So. Ganz wichtig, was ich vergessen habe. Sicherheit geht vor.
Do not forget to wear gloves. Then remove the cooling water hoses connected to the engine. Now we pull off all the electrical cables on the engine. For the subsequent orientation, I recommend the cables and the slots color. And now we have to drain the engine oil. For this purpose, we place a container inside the oil pan and open the screw. Now we remove the fuel flow in return. These also color. Then we put the injection system off. Now we disassemble the exhaust manifold at the front of the engine. Ideally open the screws from the center to the outside. Connect the exhaust manifold to the front of the log carrier using a piece of wire. We are now positioning a car lift below the engine and supporting the engine. Now we open the engine mount at the upper left. Then open the upper tooth belt cover. Now remove the lower tooth belt cover. Behind the tensioning roller is a screw which we have to remove. For this I take a ratchet with a nut, and turn the tensioning roller to the right and fix it with a split pin. Now we can remove the screw. We now remove the belt pulley of the crankshaft. Please use only suitable tools. Now we can remove the cover. We now turn clockwise on the crankshaft until the TDC mark is visible. Please ensure that the gearbox is set to neutral. In order to reach the TDC mark, the pickle must be aligned with the arrow at the bottom of the crankshaft. And the TDC mark above must be aligned with the arrow from the camshaft of the pimple. Now we loosen the tensioning roller. And now we pull the toothed belt from above. We then remove the engine mount. We now remove the valve cover. To do this, I open the screws from the center to the outside. First I start with a quarter turn, then with a complete turn, then with 2 complete turn, and finally I screw all out. Now I take the valve cover down. The seal and the cover should always be changed. Before dismantling the cylinder head, we must remove the thermostat housing. And now we remove the screw of the oil dipstick. We now disconnect the ground cable from the injection and lastly the signal cable on the rear of the engine. Finally, I can start removing the cylinder head screws. For this, the sequence shown on the plan must be observed. In this order shown, the cylinder head is tightened. The cylinder head is released in the reverse order. With this nut I now open the cylinder head screws. Now I carefully remove the screws from the cylinder head. To loosen the cylinder head, I recommend using a rubber hammer all round to knock. Lift the cylinder head out with the intake bridge. This is how a motor block looks from the inside. I remove now this cylinder head gasket. Will reinstall this, since I simulate the change only. After I dismantle the cylinder head, I now turn it on a workbench and begin grinding the support surface with sandpaper. Attention! Please never use abrasive paper that is less than 120 grains. Before that, we check whether the valve support surfaces are cracked. If the cracks are less than 0.5 millimeters, the cylinder head can still be used. For sanding, I first use sandpaper for wet use, and conventional motor oil. First, I use 400 grit sandpaper. If the dirt cannot be removed with 400 grains, then I use 240 grains. Attention! Never use sandpaper under 120 grain, otherwise the surface will be damaged. Now I use again a finer sandpaper to get the surface smooth. The surface should look like this. Now I use a hairline and check the cylinder head whether it has warped because of overheating. For this I take a measuring plate with a thickness of 0.1 mm and check the cylinder head. If at any point the measuring plate slides below the ruler, the cylinder head is warped at this point. The tolerance of 0.1 mm was exceeded. Please do not mount the cylinder head anymore, but first let it be grinded by a special company. We are now starting to grind the engine block. Before that we remove the cylinder head gasket. I now turn on the crankshaft until the cylinder pistons are at the same level. Now I put towels in the cylinders, so that no dirt can penetrate. Now I start grinding. Never use sandpaper under 120 grain size for the engine block. For the demonstration, I only cycle half the engine. Please grind your engine finished. The support surface must be greasy and dust-free. For this I use brake cleaner. Here they see to the left how it should be, and to the right as it should not be. Now we are rebuilding the engine. But for this, the holes in the engine block must be cleaned. There must be no oil or grease in the threaded holes, as otherwise the holes can tear when the cylinder head screws are screwed in. For cleaning, I use brake cleaner and spray it into the holes. Now I blow the holes with a compressor. And now I take a new cylinder head gasket and put it on the engine block. Please note that the holes in the seal correspond to the centering pins. As can be seen, the cylinder pistons are all at the same height so that when the cylinder head is mounted, the pistons cannot be consolidated with the valves. Attention! Please lubricate the inside of the cylinder with oil so that no engine damage can occur. Now I put the cylinder head on. Please take care that the head fits perfectly. Then I insert the new cylinder head screws into the engine block. Attention! Please use only new screws. First, we screw in all screws with the bit only hand tight, and then after the scheme that I'll show you right away.
Ich zeige euch dann nachher nochmal das Schema, wie in welcher Reihenfolge die Schrauben angezogen werden müssen. Das seht ihr dann alles. Jetzt, wie gesagt, mache ich das Ganze nur so handfest.
Please do not forget the surface of the valve cover seal must also be cleaned. Now I start to tighten the cylinder head bolts according to the scheme. The screws are tightened in 4 steps. Attention! Please ask in your workshop, or read on the internet what torques they can apply for your engine. The first stage is 40 Newton meters, the second stage is 60 Newton meters, the third stage is another quarter turn without pause, and the fourth stage is another quarter turn without pause. With a torque wrench I now start with the first stage with 40 Newton meter. At the same time, I observe the sketch with the scheme. Now I start with the second stage with 60 Newton meter. And now I start with the third stage, with the further quarter turn. For this I use this rotation angle measuring device. I now set the angle of rotation meter to 0. Now I turn a quarter of a turn around 90 degrees without pause. So now I draw all the screws according to the scheme. Then I start with the fourth and thus the last stage, with another quarter turn without a break. Please spray some oil on the camshaft to make the first engine start soft and low wear. Now we place the valve cover on the cylinder head with the new valve cover seal. Now we screw the screws back in a hand-tight way. We then screw the screws with the correct torque according to the manufacturer's instructions. How to change a valve cover gasket you can see in my other video. Simply press on the top right of the info card. Now I turn with the ratchet on the crankshaft until the TDC mark matches. The pimple must stand against the arrow. We are now starting to install the timing belt. Should you use the old tooth belt again, please pay attention to the direction of rotation. Before we install the tooth belt, we must screw in the motor holder again. Attention! Please screw the screws with the thread seal. For example, Loctite. Now I mount the tooth belt. Care should be taken so that the teeth of the belt are not damaged. Please note that the fork surrounds the screw so that the tensioning roller can spread out. Now we tighten the tensioning roller, and make sure that the arrow is opposite the fork. Now we check the odd mark. To do this, we have to turn 2 whole revolutions to the right on the crankshaft, and check again our TDC mark. The pimple stands opposite the arrow. And the pimple faces the arrow. Our TDC mark is correct, and now we can continue assembling the engine. We now replace the lower end and the upper toothed beetle cover and screw it tight. And now screw the dipstick again. Now we connect again all sensors, which we marked in color. And now we tighten our thermostat again. Please use the correct torques. My tip: always use a new thermostat with a new sealing ring. We then reconnect all the hoses. We now screw the ground cable of the injectors again. And now we reassemble the throttle valve, and hang the alley again. And now we screw the air filter box back on the throttle. I hope I helped you, and I wish you a lot of fun at work. Disclaimer of liability: I give no guarantee and no guarantee for the correctness and completeness of the works shown. Please ask a professional mechanic with license before attempting to repair them alone. Please always observe the legal safety instructions in order to avoid injury. Thank you very much. Goodbye.